That same year, I did participate in a dance contest in San Antonio, in which I darkened my face as part of a Michael Jackson costume. I look back now and regret that I did not understand the harmful legacy of an action like that. I had the shoes, I had a glove, and I used just a little bit of shoe polish to put under on my cheeks. And the reason I used a very little bit is because I don't know if anybody's ever tried that, but you cannot get shoe polish off. But it was a dance contest.
Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. Well, we've got a lot to get to today, including new information about Donald Trump's quest for cash from Deutsche Bank during the 2016 campaign, as well as new reports showing the sheer magnitude of the Trump administration's policy of taking children from their migrant parents at the southern border. But we start this morning with the latest on the situation in Virginia, where the Democratic governor, Ralph Northam, held a lengthy and some might say bizarre press conference yesterday in which he rejected calls to resign his office and was narrowly prevented by his wife from performing the moonwalk. Northam now denies being in the now infamous yearbook photo depicting both a person in blackface and someone dressed as a member of the Klan. But he admits to wearing blackface to portray Michael Jackson that same year in 1984. 36 hours after the scandal broke, Northam is facing calls to resign from members of his own party, now including both Democratic senators from the state, former Secretary of State and presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, and former Governor Doug Wilder, Virginia's first black governor. Let's bring in our panel. Elie Mystal, editor of AboveTheLaw.com. Lamont Bagby, a Virginia state delegate and chair of the Virginia Black Legislative Caucus. Dionne of the Washington Post. Tiffany Cross of the Beat DC. And Jason Johnson, politics editor of TheRoot.com and an MSNBC contributor. I want to go to Delegate Bagby first. Let's just talk about what happened yesterday. The Legislative Black Caucus of Virginia met with Northam, if my understanding is correct, and then after that, your caucus decided that he ought to resign. Can you just walk us through that a little bit?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
Right. Our understanding is that the Legislative Black Caucus of Virginia met with the governor, and then the decision was made that he ought to resign. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yes. Friday was a tough day. I gave a floor speech speaking on some of the things that we had been challenged with in the last 48 hours. You've heard, Joy, that the Black Caucus has no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. We talked about a number of things. Then 2 hours after my floor speech, that was challenged, and we had to go to our friend, Ralph Northam, myself and 10 of my colleagues from the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus went and met with the governor, had a frank conversation with him where my members were able to talk to him directly and tell him how disappointed and betrayed they felt. At that point, the governor also had an opportunity to tell us some things and let us know if anything else was out there. And at that point, we then decided to go back after we prayed. We had decided to go back and caucus and talk about what our next action was. And we concluded that the course of action that we had to take, although uncomfortable, was to go back to the governor and ask for his resignation.
And Mr. Bagby, if I can just stick with you for just one moment, were you surprised by the press conference that the governor gave in which he took back his previous statement that he was in that photo and then added that he had done blackface that same year regarding Michael Jackson? And were you surprised he didn't resign?
Joy, I was surprised and disappointed. I could not believe what was happening. I think the governor missed a real opportunity to resign gracefully because he still has an opportunity. Ralph still has an opportunity to help those that are hurting. And right now, the Commonwealth is hurting. And the best way for us to begin the healing process is for the governor to resign and allow us to turn the corner.
Let me go to Jason Johnson, who's doing a lot of reporting on this. When we started the show yesterday, Doug Wilder, the former governor of Virginia, was saying that it was up to the governor, Governor Northam, what he was going to do. Both of the senators from Virginia were also giving him space. That changed. Something materially changed after that press conference. And now the chorus includes Hillary Clinton, the former former candidate for president and secretary of state. It includes the DNC chair, Tom Perez. It's really become a tidal wave. To what do you attribute, just in your reporting, Northam still hanging on when it is just really becoming overwhelming, the calls for him to resign?
Yeah, it's just got to be his arrogance, Joy. And look, I had the opportunity, I had about a 30-minute conversation last night with Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, both on and off the record. And he, like a lot of other Democrats in Virginia, look, he's disappointed. No one's happy about this. There's no schadenfreude or anything else like that. But the reality is, Virginia Democrats, they have an election this year, okay? They have issues. They have policies that they want to put forward. And their general belief at this point, having had this conversation, is it's very difficult for Governor Northam to continue to run the state when his own party wants him to go. And I think another important thing to remember about this, yes, he doesn't want to resign, yes, he wants to fight, but there's no one who can save Northam at this point. That press conference was his own fault. There's no group of black pastors who can sit solemnly behind him, put a hand on his shoulder and say, we forgive him. You know, Lieutenant Governor Fairfax can't cradle him like Stephen and Django and say, I'll protect you, I'll protect you. He caused this problem on his own, and the best way to save his party would be for him to leave.
EJ, Dionne, let me go to you on this now. The DNC chair yesterday, Tom Perez, came out with a statement, and he doesn't normally jump into these state-level political fights, but he wrote his past actions, Northam's, are completely antithetical to everything the Democratic Party stands for. Virginians and people across the country deserve better from their leaders, and it's clear that Ralph Northam has lost the trust of his ability to govern. It's time for Ralph Northam to step aside and let Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax serve Virginians as their next governor. There's a lot at stake here, EJ. Virginia is a very important state to Democrats. It's a blue trending state. Does this wind up becoming an issue, to be blunt, for 2020? Because I'm hearing a lot of people counting up the tally of which potential and declared presidential candidates have said something and who have not.
Well, I suspect before this day is out, every Democratic presidential candidate will call on him to resign if they haven't already. I mean, you got to start with the picture itself, which I think was just a shock to people. It was a double punch of racism. It was the blackface and the Klansmen, and everybody who looked at that, or virtually everybody, I think just had a sense of shock. Then you have to look at the history of the modern Democratic Party. From JFK and LBJ forward, the Democratic Party has become the party of equal rights, civil rights, and African-American empowerment. Most African-American elected officials are Democrats. The party would look totally hypocritical. That's why I think Tom Perez stepped in. That's why all these other Democrats are speaking. They'd look totally hypocritical, having criticized Trump on this, having criticized Steve King's racism, not to jump on this. Now, was there a path for Governor Northam? Maybe if at the outset he had really come out in a heartfelt way with a kind of parable of conversion and redemption and really owned this past, maybe this would have helped him out of it. But in the end, I just don't think it was survivable. I just come back to the shock you felt when you saw that picture. And I think Democrats feel he's going to go because, yes, he will get in the way of the next elections, and he will get in the way of the Democrats' argument about equal rights.
Yeah, and Tiffany, that was the argument that was made about the Al Franken photo, right? That when that photo came out, Kirsten Gillibrand and others made the argument that it complicates the Democratic Party's attempts to argue about Donald Trump and his 19 times being accused of sexual misconduct if they had somebody in the party. And, you know, she's received a lot of backlash for that, but that was the argument that was made. On this case, for the Democratic Party, Virginia has the 9th largest black population in the United States, of all of the states. It is a state that is entirely dependent, and the Democratic Party there is very dependent on African Americans, as is the party writ large. And I wonder if the fact that Justin Fairfax barely underperformed Ralph Northam when they ran for governor and lieutenant governor, the fact that he is just as viable, to be blunt, as a statewide candidate, if those two factors, the large African-American population and Justin Fairfax's separate political viability, just make this really, really hard for Northam to survive.
Well, let me first say, I think yesterday, before this press conference, the general sentiment was Ralph Northam needs to resign. I think after that press conference, the general sentiment is, would you get the hell out of here already? This has gotten increasingly ridiculous with some of the things that he said. And I want to respectfully disagree a little bit with some of my fellow panelists. I definitely hear what EJ is saying. However, I was not shocked. I bet there's a lot of other people who were not shocked. I want to respectfully disagree with Delegate Bagby. I was not hurt. I bet there are a lot of other people who were not hurt. I was more, you know, this is something that I think a lot of people maybe expected. It's Virginia. It's a Bible Belt state with a long, ugly history of racism. I think a lot of us experience these quote-unquote allies who have their own issues around white supremacy. I think, you know, this is yet another example of the casual racism we see that can come back to haunt you. These decisions have consequences. So to your point about the 9% of the electorate who is African American, I mean, such is true across the country. I mean, the path to political leadership must go through the black community. And if Ralph Northam desires to serve, then he can serve by stepping down and following and giving that opportunity to Justin Fairfax. But there's also a deeper issue here, Joy, that I think we have to address, and that's not the political issues, but the policy around some of these things that we see happening. We can all engage in this, you know, temporary outrage, but I just don't want us to do that without addressing some of the systemic issues. So yes, there's this picture of him in a Klan's uniform, but there are systemic issues that permeate across all industries. Let's address the fact that this was in a medical school book. He was not the only person in blackface, if that is him. There was another person in a Klan's outfit. There was another person who was in blackface dressed up as Diana Ross. And so when you look at that and think about how black people are treated in hospitals, when you look at studies, there was actually a study at the University of Virginia that addressed how black patients were not prescribed medications because they believed these awful stereotypes that black people didn't feel pain. These are medical students who felt this way, that black people in 2016 did not feel pain the same that white people did. So there's a lot that we can get into, which is why AM Joy is the best show, because we have time to have a deep examination of some of these things. But I just think this issue is bigger than Ralph Northam doing, you know, something racist. He didn't address him being called Coon Man. We're not fools. You don't have to, you know, spit in our face and tell me it's rain. Don't play ignorant and feign ignorance that you don't know why people called you Coon Man. We know what that means. So I think there's room for a lot of conversation here.
Yeah, and you know, Elie, you wrote a piece that in which was titled very bluntly, "There's no argument for Ralph Northam to keep his job." But the bigger issue is very few people I know that were African American that I know were shocked. I mean, the idea that, you know, African Americans are mocked, you know, is no more shocking than the mockery that we saw indigenous people subjected to. You know, they're subjected to being mascots, et cetera. African Americans, unfortunately, this is kind of this country, right? It's part of the history. So in this case, was there at some point between when this broke and this press conference yesterday when Ralph Northam could have done it? It's hard to imagine, but you seem to say no. There was no point at which he could have made a turn that could have allowed him to maybe address some of the issues that you just heard Tiffany did.
No, the left turn at Albuquerque, if we are to believe his ridiculous press conference, was when his magic black friend, Seth, in 2017, told him, hey, this is offensive. If he wanted to have a viable path at that point, what he needed to do, once Seth woke him up, was to come out and put himself in front of the voters of Virginia and say, hey, this is what I did. I didn't know until Seth told me that this was a bad thing. But now that I do know, I am presenting myself for you to judge me on before you vote for me, right? That was his path out. When he didn't take that path, when he kept hiding it, when he kept hoping nobody would figure out his shoe polish, what was in his closet, that's when he lost his moral authority to govern. And this is the thing, like, it's not on. I appreciate State Senator Bagby right now. I appreciate Justin Fairfax. I appreciate Governor Wilder. But it is not on African Americans to push this man out the door. He should have the honor and dignity to leave, because it is 2019, and we have way more important things to be talking about than still explaining to white people why blackface is a problem. All right? I never dress up in I never paint my face. I went as Bowser one year. I didn't paint my face green. I went as Cookie Monster one year. I didn't paint my face blue. I went as Barack Obama one year. I did not paint my face half white. So there is no reason for any African American to have to waste time talking about this man. He needs to take the honorable way out and resign.
I want to bring one more issue back in. We don't have tons of time. I know EJ wants to jump back in, but I want to go to Lamont Bagby just really quickly, State Senator, because I know that this also began as an issue about abortion. There's a lot that's going on here, and I want to allow you to address, apparently there were some physical threats and security concerns for another member of your state government over that, and that's kind of where this all began, if people can believe that. Can you just address that really quickly, that aspect of it?
Yeah, the speculation is that this is a result of the argument that Ralph Northam made as it relates to a woman having the right to choose. We've had it's been very intense. We're in the middle of session. On Tuesday is crossover where the House members send their bills over to the Senate and vice versa. We are actually in the middle of a debate over taxes and conformity, which will really impact those that are living under or just above the poverty line, because it really focuses on earned income tax credits. And so there's a lot of work to be done really in the next 48 hours before crossover. Right. And so that woman's right to choose piece was the part that I think turned those individuals that may have known Ralph Northam a time ago, and were disappointed to see that he was choosing to fight the battle in the fashion that they opposed.
I see that maybe the origins of some of this were that people who might have known about this may have come out. That makes sense. Elie Mystal and Lamont Bagby. EJ, I know you had a thought. Hold it till later, because you, Tiffany, and Jason will be back later in our show, and you guys can